The brown cardboard box sat on my dining table, a monument to my sister's absence. It was sealed with cheap tape, the kind that splits your fingernails when you try to peel it open. Inside were the remnants of Liana's life. A coffee mug stained with the ghost of her favorite lipstick, a tangled silver necklace, a stack of unpaid bills, and at the bottom, a small black USB drive. I plugged it into my laptop. My hands trembled. The police had called it an accident. A fall from her apartment balcony, a tragic, impulsive act in the middle of the night. But Liana wasn't impulsive. She was meticulous, careful. She was terrified. The drive contained a single folder encrypted and one text file left bare in the open. I clicked it. It was a letter addressed to me. Elara, if you're reading this, it means I was wrong. I thought I was smarter than him. I thought I could beat him. Don't believe what they'll say. It wasn't an accident. His name is Mr. Sterling. He's not who he says he is. He owns Ethelred Global, but that's just the tip. He owns people. Elara. He owned me. The files on this drive are my insurance. They're messy, they're incomplete, but they're something. Don't go to the police. You can't trust anyone. Find someone on the outside, someone he can't touch. I love you. Be safe. Liana, my blood ran cold. Mr. Sterling, her boss. The man who'd appeared in our lives 6 months ago, a phantom in a tailored suit. Liana had been his executive assistant. At first, she was thrilled. The pay, the prestige. But the thrill had curdled into fear. She'd started locking her bedroom door. She'd jump at her own shadow. He watches everyone, she'd whispered to me a week before she died. He knows everything. I tried the police. A weary detective with coffee-stained teeth listened to my story, his expression a mask of practiced sympathy. Miss Vance, grief can do strange things. We investigated thoroughly. There were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry. It was a terrible, tragic accident. He slid the case file across his desk. Closed. I went to the Ethelred Global Tower, a monolith of glass and steel that scraped the clouds. The receptionist, a woman with a smile as polished as her marble desk, told me Mr. Sterling was on an indefinite sabbatical. Out of the country, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Unreachable. He was gone, a ghost, and I was left with a box of my sister's things, a cryptic letter, and a mountain of my family's debt. My father's business had failed a year before Liana's death. The medical bills from my mother's long illness had buried us. The foreclosure notice on the house was the final nail in our coffin. That's when Mr. Abernathy, my father's lawyer, called. His voice was clipped, all business. Elara, I have a proposition, an unconventional one. I braced myself. I'm not selling the house, Mr. Abernathy. It's not about the house, he said. It's about you. There is a benefactor, a foreign dignitary looking for a wife, an American bride. He is willing to settle all of your family's debts, provide a generous allowance for your parents, in exchange for your hand in marriage. I laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. You're joking. I assure you I am not, he said, completely serious. His name is Prince Kaelen of Valtoria. It's a small but incredibly wealthy principality. He is private, reclusive. This arrangement would be mutually beneficial. You save your family. He gains a connection to the States. It was madness, a fairy tale nightmare. Marry a stranger? A prince? But what choice did I have? Let my parents lose everything? Live on the street? I need to meet him, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I need to see his face. Of course, Mr. Abernathy replied smoothly. He is currently in town. He will see you tomorrow at the Grand Royale Hotel, Suite 1408. Be there at noon. The next day, I stood outside the door to Suite 1408, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wore my only good dress, a simple black sheath. I felt like an offering, a sacrifice. The door opened, and the world stopped. The man standing there wasn't the Mr. Sterling from Liana's descriptions. This man's hair was a darker shade of brown, styled differently. His jawline seemed sharper, as if he'd had subtle work done. But his eyes were the same, a piercing, chilling blue, the color of a winter sky just before a storm. He smiled, a perfect practice curve of his lips. Elara Vance, I'm Prince Kaelen. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. His voice, it was deeper now, modulated with a faint, unplaceable accent. But I'd heard it before, in the background of a panicked phone call from Liana, a voice that had promised her the world, then threatened to take it all away. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a prince standing in front of me. It was a monster who had killed my sister, changed his name, and remade his face. He hadn't vanished. He just put on a new mask. He wasn't here to marry me. He was here to finish what he started. And our wedding was going to be my funeral. My lungs burned. I'd forgotten how to breathe. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to bolt down the plush hotel corridor and never look back. But I couldn't. I thought of the foreclosure notice on the kitchen counter, of the defeated slump of my father's shoulders. I was trapped. I forced a smile, feeling the muscles in my face ache with the effort. Prince Kaelen, the pleasure is all mine. I extended a hand, my own trembling so slightly I hoped he wouldn't notice. He took it. His grip was firm, dry, and cold. It felt like holding a stone. He didn't shake it, just held it for a beat too long, his blue eyes scanning my face, assessing, dissecting. Please, come in. The suite was opulent, all gold and cream furniture that looked too expensive to ever be used. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the city, but it felt like we were a mile above everyone else, in a world with its own rules. He gestured to a velvet sofa. "Can I get you something? Tea? Water?" he asked, his voice a smooth, dangerous baritone. "Water, please," I managed to say. My throat was sandpaper. He moved to a small bar, his back to me. I took the opportunity to scan the room. No personal effects, no luggage. It was a stage set. He was a performer. He returned with a crystal glass and handed it to me. His fingers brushed mine, and I flinched, pulling my hand back. He noticed. A flicker of something, amusement, crossed his lips. "You're nervous," he stated. It wasn't a question. "It's not every day a girl meets a prince," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I was playing a part, the part of a desperate, grateful girl. I had to be convincing. "Indeed." He sat opposite me in a leather armchair, steepling his fingers. "Mr. Abernathy tells me your family is in a difficult position." The directness was a slap in the face. He wasn't courting me. He was buying me. "He was honest with you, Your Highness." "Kaelen," he corrected. "We will be family after all. There is no need for such formality." He leaned forward slightly. "I am aware of your sister's passing. My condolences." The air crackled. This was it. The test. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat. I kept my eyes on his, searching for any sign of a tell, any crack in the princely facade. There was nothing. Only that chilling, placid blue. "Thank you," I said, my voice soft. I let a hint of grief color it. Real grief that was now tangled with terror. "It was unexpected. An accident." "Was it?" he asked, his head tilted with a predator's curiosity. "I read the report. A fall from a balcony. Tragic. One must be careful in high places." The threat was unmistakable. "I can push you, too." I took a slow sip of water, my mind racing. I couldn't show fear. I couldn't show I knew. I had to be the grieving, naive sister. "The police were very thorough," I said, setting the glass down with a steady hand. "They said there was nothing more to investigate." "Of course." He leaned back, a satisfied look on his face. He'd gotten his answer. I was either ignorant or a very good liar. He was betting on the former. "Well, Elara, I am a man who appreciates directness, so I will be direct. My country, Valtoria, is traditional. A prince must have a princess. I have no time for the distractions of a modern courtship. You are from a good family. You are intelligent, and you are, if I may say so, beautiful. You are a suitable candidate." He made it sound like I was a horse he was considering for a race. "And my family's debts," I asked, the words tasting like ash, "will be settled upon the signing of the marriage contract. Your parents will receive a monthly stipend for the rest of their lives. You will want for nothing." He paused, letting the offer hang in the air, a golden cage. "All I ask in return is your loyalty, your discretion, your absolute devotion." He wasn't asking for my love. He was asking for my silence, my complicity. I looked down at my hands clasped in my lap. I thought of Liana's letter. "Don't go to the police. You can't trust anyone." She was right. But she was wrong about one thing. I couldn't find someone on the outside he couldn't touch. I had to get close. I had to become the one person he would never suspect. I looked up, meeting his icy blue gaze. I let a single perfect tear slide down my cheek. It wasn't hard to summon. "Yes," I whispered, my voice thick with feigned emotion. "Yes, Kaelen, I will marry you." His smile widened, but it never reached his eyes. "Excellent." He stood and walked to the door, holding it open for me. "Mr. Abernathy will handle the details. I will see you at the altar." I walked out of the suite on legs that felt like jelly. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, I leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. The game had begun. He thought he was silencing the last witness. He had no idea he'd just invited the Avenger into his home. My wedding wouldn't be my funeral. It would be his. The next 3 weeks were a blur of controlled chaos. The marriage contract was a document of cold, hard reality. I signed it in Mr. Gaw Abernathy's sterile office, my signature a scrawl on the line that bound me to a killer. In return, a wire transfer for an astronomical sum hit my parents' bank account, clearing every debt. The relief on their faces was a physical blow. My father wept. My mother, for the first time in a year, looked truly at peace. They saw a savior. I saw my warden. My life was no longer my own. A stylist named Jean-Pierre descended on my small apartment, his eyes wide with a mixture of pity and excitement. He whisked away my simple clothes and replaced them with a wardrobe of elegant, understated designer pieces. "A princess must look the part," he'd chirped, holding up a silk gown the color of storm clouds. All I could think was that a princess also lived in a tower. Kaelen and I only met twice more before the wedding. Both times were in public, under the watchful eye of the press he'd so carefully arranged. A staged lunch at a rooftop restaurant, a photo op at a charity gala. He played the part of the doting fiancé perfectly. His hand would rest on the small of my back, a proprietary weight that made my skin crawl. He'd whisper in my ear, his breath warm against my skin, but the words were always chilling. "You're a natural at this," he murmured at the gala as we posed for a flashing wall of cameras. "Smiling for the people who will soon believe you are happy." "I am happy," I lied, my smile never wavering. "I'm saving my family." "Family is a weakness," he said, his voice dropping to a low purr. "It's a lever. Anyone can be broken if you know which lever to pull. Remember that." He was testing me, always testing. I knew he had people watching me, reporting my every move. I had to be the grateful, overwhelmed bride-to-be. I spent my days with my mother, helping her choose new furniture, and my evenings alone, staring at the encrypted USB drive on my desk. It was my only weapon, but it was useless without a key. One rainy Tuesday, there was a knock at my door. It was him, Kaelen. No security detail, no driver. Just him, standing in the doorway of my old apartment building, looking impossibly out of place. He was holding a small flat gift box. "May I come in?" he asked, his polite tone a stark contrast to the invasion of his presence. I had no choice but to step aside. He entered, his gaze sweeping over my small living room, the boxes still packed in the corner. It was the first time he'd seen my real world, and I felt a surge of defensive anger. "I wanted to give you this," he said, handing me the box. "An engagement gift." My fingers trembled as I opened it. Nestled in black satin was a silver necklace, a tangled silver necklace. It was Liana's. I recognized the unique clasp, a tiny, broken heart she'd had fixed a dozen times. I'd seen it in the cardboard box of her things. He must have taken it before he left her apartment. "It was found," he said, watching my face with an unnerving intensity. "At the scene. The police missed it. I thought it should be returned to the family." The threat was as clear as if he'd held a gun to my head. I was there. "I took this from her body. I can get to anything, anyone." I forced myself to pick it up, the metal cold against my palm. "It was my sister's," I whispered, letting my voice crack with genuine horror. He would mistake it for grief. "I know," he said, a ghost of a smile on his lips. "I thought it might bring you some comfort." He stayed for 10 more minutes, making excruciating small talk, his presence poisoning the air. When he finally left, I locked the door, slid to the floor, and threw up. He wasn't just going to silence me, he was going to torture me first. That night, rage finally burned through my fear. I couldn't do this alone. I needed help. I thought of Leo, a friend from college, a reclusive genius who lived in a world of code and firewalls. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but he was the only person I knew who was paranoid enough and skilled enough for this. He was off the grid, untraceable. I found his old contact info on a dusty hard drive. I sent a single encrypted email. "Leo, it's Elara. I'm in trouble. I need your help. It's a matter of life and death. I've attached a file. It's encrypted. I need to know what's on it. Please." I attached a dummy file first, a test. If he replied, I'd send the real one. I hit send, my heart pounding. It was a shot in the dark, a message in a bottle thrown into a digital ocean. For an hour, there was nothing. Then my laptop chimed. A new email. The subject line was a single question mark. I took a deep breath, attached the encrypted folder from Liana's drive, and pressed send again. The reply came back almost instantly. This is bad, Elara. Very, very bad. Who did you piss off? My hands shook as I typed my reply. I'm about to marry him. Leo's reply sat on my screen, a digital death sentence. I'm about to marry him. I stared at the words, my reflection a pale, haunted ghost in the dark monitor. My phone buzzed, a text from Kaelen. The car will pick you up at 8 a.m. for the final fitting. Don't be late. He was already controlling my schedule, my life. I ignored it and typed back to Leo. What did you find? The reply was instant. Not over email. This isn't secure. I'm calling you from a burner. My phone rang a second later, an unknown number. I snatched it. Leo? Elara, what the hell have you gotten yourself into? His voice was a frantic whisper. This isn't just some shady businessman. This is a ghost. A network. Just tell me what's on the drive, I begged, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. It's financials. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, money laundering on a scale I've never seen. But that's not the worst part. Buried in the code are ledgers, transactions, not for money, for cargo. Shipments, dates, routes. The code words are ugly, livestock, pharmaceuticals. It's a trafficking ring, Elara. He's not just a murderer. He's a monster who trades in people. My blood turned to ice. Liana hadn't just stumbled upon a murder. She'd uncovered an empire of evil. Is there anything that connects him directly to my sister? Not in these files, Leo said, his voice heavy with regret. They're too clean. But there's a name that appears over and over as a silent partner, a name linked to the Valtorian royal family's private investment fund. Ethelred Global was just a front. The real money, the real power is in Valtoria. Kaelen, Prince Kaelen. He hadn't just changed his name. He'd taken on a new identity, one with diplomatic immunity and centuries of built-in prestige. He was untouchable. You have to go to the authorities, Leo. Interpol, someone. And tell them what? That I hacked into the encrypted files of a prince who's about to marry an American citizen? They'll laugh me out of the room, and then he'll come for me. He'll come for you, Elara. You have to get out. Run. Now. Forget the money. Forget your parents. Just run. I can't, I whispered, the truth of it a physical weight in my chest. He has my family. He'll always have them. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear Leo's ragged breathing. Then you're marrying a king of hell, he said finally. And I can't help you. I'm wiping everything, burning the connection. Don't try to contact me again. I'm sorry. The line went dead. I was alone. Truly, terrifyingly alone. The wedding was a spectacle, he asked. A lavish affair in a cathedral with ceilings so high they felt like the sky itself. The pews were packed with dignitaries, socialites, and reporters. The world watched as Elara Vance, the girl from nowhere, married Prince Kaelen of Valtoria. I wore a white gown that felt like a shroud, my face a mask of serene happiness I'd practiced in the mirror for weeks. My father walked me down the aisle, his face beaming with pride and relief. He squeezed my hand. He's a good man, Elara. He's going to take care of you. I couldn't answer. My eyes were fixed on the man waiting at the altar. Kaelen stood tall and imposing in his dress uniform, medals glinting on his chest. He was the picture of royalty. But as I got closer, I saw the truth in his eyes. A cold, predatory gleam. He wasn't looking at his bride, he was looking at his prize. The ceremony was a blur of vows and organ music. When the time came, I said, I do, my voice clear and steady. A lie to save the people I loved, a curse on the man I hated. He slid a ring onto my finger, a band of platinum encrusted with diamonds that felt heavier than a chain. You may now kiss the bride. Kaelen lifted my veil. His hands were cold on my skin. He leaned in, his lips brushing mine. It wasn't a kiss of passion. It was a brand, a seal of ownership. You belong to me now, he whispered, so softly only I could hear. The reception was a whirlwind of congratulations and champagne. I smiled until my cheeks ached, danced with a man who felt like death, and played the part of the blissful new princess. But every time he touched me, every time he looked at me with those winter sky eyes, I saw Liana's face. I saw her fall. Hours later, we were in the back of a limousine, speeding toward a private airfield. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows. The silence in the car was thick and suffocating. Tired? He asked, breaking the quiet. It's been a long day, I said, staring out the window. Don't worry, he said, a dark amusement in his tone. You'll have plenty of time to rest in Valtoria. It's a very quiet place. very private. He reached over and took my hand, his thumb stroking the diamond ring he'd given me. You played your part beautifully today, Elara. I'm impressed. I didn't respond. I just watched the city disappear, knowing I was leaving my entire world behind. I was flying to a gilded cage in a foreign land, a prisoner in a prince's castle. But he didn't know about the ledgers. He didn't know that Leo's words had ignited a fire in me. He thought he'd broken me. He was wrong. He had just armed me. The flight to Valtoria was on a private jet, a cavern of leather and polished wood. Kaelen didn't speak to me. He sat across from me, scrolling through a tablet, his face illuminated by the cool blue light. He was ignoring me, but it was a deliberate, punishing kind of silence. It was a reminder that I was an object, a passenger on his journey, not a partner. When we began our descent, I pressed my face to the window. Valtoria was a fairy tale kingdom nestled in a valley surrounded by jagged, snow-capped mountains. A pristine lake reflected a castle that seemed to be carved directly from the mountain's stone. It was breathtaking. And it was a prison. As we taxied, I saw the armed guards. They weren't just for show. They patrolled the perimeter of the airfield, their faces grim, their assault rifles held at the ready. This wasn't a peaceful principality. It was a fortress. A convoy of black SUVs awaited us. Kaelen and I were in the lead vehicle, separated from the driver by a soundproof partition. Welcome to your new home, he said, his voice flat. You'll find the people here are devoted, loyal to a fault. They would do anything for the crown. And you are the crown, I thought, a chill running down my spine. The drive to the castle was winding and scenic, but I saw the checkpoints, the high walls topped with razor wire, the surveillance cameras hidden in the ancient trees. This wasn't a home. It was the most secure, most impenetrable place on Earth. He hadn't just brought me here to hide me. He'd brought me here so that no one could ever find me. We were met at the grand entrance by a line of servants in crisp, old-fashioned uniforms. They bowed their heads in unison as we entered. The great hall was a cavern of marble and gold, with tapestries depicting bloody battles and stern-faced kings hanging from the walls. The air was cold, smelling of stone and beeswax. An older woman with her hair in a severe bun stepped forward. She was thin and rigid, with eyes like chips of flint. Your Highnesses, she said, her voice devoid of warmth. I am Anya, the head of household. Your rooms are prepared. Thank you, Anya, Kaelen said, his tone clipped. Show my wife to her chambers. I have business to attend to. He turned and walked away without a backward glance, leaving me standing alone in the vast echoing hall. Anya's eyes flickered over me, a quick, dismissive assessment. This way, princess. She led me up a sweeping staircase and down a long corridor. My footsteps were silent on the thick, runner-carpeted floor. She stopped outside a pair of heavy carved oak doors and pushed them open. The suite was larger than my entire apartment back home. A 4-poster bed dominated one room, a sitting area with a crackling fireplace another. French doors opened onto a stone balcony that overlooked a manicured yet lifeless garden. Dinner is at 8. The prince will expect you to be punctual, Anya said, her voice a monotone. Your things have been unpacked. If you require anything, you will use the intercom. Do not leave this suite without an escort. The threat was unspoken but clear. You are a prisoner. Of course, I said, my voice quiet. She gave a stiff nod and left, closing the heavy doors behind me. The click of the lock was deafening. I was alone. I walked onto the balcony, at the frigid mountain air biting at my skin. Below, the gardens were perfect, but sterile. Not a single weed, not a single overgrown branch. It was a reflection of Kaelen's world, utterly controlled. At 8 o'clock, I was ready. I wore a dark blue gown that made me feel like I was drowning. Anya arrived to escort me to a dining room that was as large as a ballroom. A long table could have seated 50, but there were only 2 place settings at the far end. Kaelen was already there, a glass of red wine in his hand. You're on time, he noted as I sat down. I appreciate punctuality. Dinner was a silent, agonizing affair. Servants brought us course after course, their movements silent and efficient. Kaelen didn't attempt to make conversation. He simply watched me, his gaze a physical weight. He was enjoying my discomfort, savoring his power. After dessert, he stood. Come, he commanded. I followed him from the dining room, my heart pounding. We didn't go back to my suite. We went to his. It was even grander than mine, a study in dark wood and leather. He poured himself another drink and turned to face me. "Let's be clear about the rules of this marriage, Elara," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You will be a perfect princess in public. You will smile, you will wave, you will produce an heir when the time is right. In private, you will be invisible. You will not ask questions. You will not go where you are not permitted. You exist to serve my purpose. Do you understand?" I lifted my chin, meeting his cold eyes. "I understand." "Good," he said, taking a step closer. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch making me flinch. "And one more thing," he whispered, his face inches from mine. "Your sister was a curious girl. She asked too many questions. She poked her nose into places it didn't belong. Don't make her mistake." The threat was explicit, a final warning. I didn't pull away. I held his gaze, channeling all my grief and rage into a single cold look. "I'm not my sister," I said, my voice steady. "She was weak. I'm not." A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. He was pleased. He thought he'd broken me, reshaped me into something he could understand, a survivor who would do anything to live. He had no idea I was a survivor who would do anything to make him pay. He stepped back, a flicker of something like respect in his eyes. "We'll see," he said. "Go to your room." I walked out of his study, my back straight, my head held high. The moment I was back in the safety of my locked suite, I collapsed against the door, my body shaking with adrenaline. He thought he had won, but he had just made a fatal mistake. He'd told me what he feared most: a curious girl, and I had a whole castle to explore. The lock on my door was the only thing standing between me and the rest of the castle. It was a heavy, old-fashioned deadbolt, a prison door. But Kaelen had made one mistake. He thought fear would keep me contained. He didn't understand that fear was also a fuel. The next morning, I decided to test my boundaries. After a breakfast I barely touched, I informed Anya I wished to walk in the gardens. Her flinty eyes narrowed. "The gardens are not to be explored unaccompanied. Princess, a guard will be assigned." "I'd prefer to be alone," I said, infusing my voice with the entitled boredom of a royal. "Fresh air, to clear my head after the journey." Anya's lips thinned into a disapproving line, but she couldn't outright refuse a princess's simple request. "Very well, but do not stray from the main paths." I walked out into the crisp mountain air, a stone-faced guard trailing 50 yards behind me. The gardens were a geometric masterpiece, but they felt like a graveyard. I wandered for an hour, mapping the castle's exterior in my head. I counted windows, noted guard patrols, and saw the high wall that enclosed the entire estate. There was no way out, but there were ways in, and secrets to be found inside. That afternoon, I got lost on my way back from the library. I wandered down a dusty, unused corridor, my footsteps echoing on the stone floor. Portraits of grim-faced Valtorian ancestors lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow my every move. I was pushing my luck, and I knew it. I turned a corner and almost collided with a young maid carrying a stack of linens. She dropped them with a frightened gasp, her face pale. "I'm so sorry, Your Highness. I didn't see you," she stammered, dropping into a clumsy curtsy. "It's all right," I said, my voice gentle. I knelt to help her, my movements slow and non-threatening. "What's your name?" "Lena, Princess," she whispered, not meeting my eyes. "Lena," I repeated. "This castle is so large, I'm afraid I'm completely turned around. Can you tell me how to get back to the royal wing?" "Of course, Princess," she said, her voice trembling. She pointed down the corridor. "Through that archway up the main staircase. It's not far." "Thank you, Lena." I stood, brushing off my gown. I hesitated, then leaned in conspiratorially. "Can I ask you something? Is there any part of the castle I should avoid? Places that are private?" Lena's eyes darted around nervously. "The East Wing is the prince's private residence, Princess. No one is allowed there, especially his personal study. It's always locked." "His study?" I asked, feigning casual curiosity. "Of course, a prince needs his privacy." "Yes, Princess," she said, eager to agree. "He spends hours in there. No one goes in but him." I gave her a reassuring smile. "Thank you, Lena. You've been very helpful." I walked away, my mind racing. The locked study. That was where the secrets would be. That night, I waited until the castle was silent. At 2 a.m, I slipped out of my room. The lock on my door was simple, a privacy lock I could easily manipulate with a hairpin from my dressing table. The corridor was dark and empty, a long, terrifying tunnel. I made my way to the East Wing, my heart hammering against my ribs. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot. I found the door Lena had described. It was made of dark, heavy wood, with a large, ornate brass lock. It looked impenetrable. I tried my hairpin. It was useless. I was about to give up when I noticed something. The key wasn't just in the lock. It was stuck in the other side. Someone had been careless or rushed. I pulled out a second, sturdier pin from my hair and began to work, my fingers clumsy with adrenaline. I felt the tumblers give way, one by one. A soft click echoed in the silence. The door swung open. The room smelled of leather and old paper. It was Kaelin's inner sanctum. A massive mahogany desk dominated the space, its surface perfectly clear, except for a laptop and a single leather-bound book. The walls were lined with shelves, not of books, but of labeled black ledger boxes. Liana's ledgers. I rushed to the desk. I didn't dare touch the laptop. But the book, I opened it. It was a guest book. But the names weren't guests. They were dates, locations, and what looked like account numbers. It was a record of his illegal transactions, written in his own hand. Proof. I snapped a picture of a page with my phone, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. It was enough. It was a start. I was about to close the book when I heard it. A footstep in the corridor. Heavy, deliberate. It wasn't a servant. It was him. Panic seized me. I slammed the book shut, my mind racing. There was no time to get out the way I came. I scanned the room wildly. Behind a tapestry depicting a hunting scene, I saw it. A small, almost invisible door. A priest hole. A secret passage. I dove for it just as the study door creaked open. I slipped inside the dark, narrow space, pulling the heavy tapestry across the entrance just as a sliver of light cut through the darkness. I heard Kaelen enter the room. I held my breath, my body pressed against the cold, damp stone, listening to the sound of my own husband, my sister's killer, just feet away. I pressed myself flat against the cold, slimy stone of the secret passage, the rough tapestry scratching my cheek. I could hear Kaelen moving in the study, the soft thud of his dress shoes on the Persian rug, the clink of a glass being set down on the desk. He was calm, unhurried. That was more terrifying than if he'd been raging. Then silence, a long, drawn-out silence that stretched my nerves to the breaking point. I knew he was standing by the desk. I pictured him looking at the leather-bound book, his eyes the color of a winter storm, scanning it, noticing the infinitesimal misalignment of the pages. "Anya," he said, his voice resonating through the wood. It wasn't loud, but it carried an undeniable authority. I froze, thinking he'd found an intercom. But there was no reply. He was alone, and he knew someone had been there. I heard him move again, this time toward the tapestry. My blood turned to ice. I was trapped. A rat in a barrel. I fumbled for my phone, my sweaty fingers slipping on the screen. I had to delete the picture, destroy the evidence. That's when it happened. A soft chime, the unmistakable sound of a low battery notification. It echoed in the suffocating darkness of the passage like a scream. The footsteps stopped, right in front of the tapestry. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I was a statue carved from fear. A hand gripped the edge of the heavy fabric. It was pulled aside with a swift, violent jerk. Light flooded the narrow space, blinding me. I was silhouetted against the dark stone, a perfect target. Kaelen stood there, filling the doorway, his face a mask of cold fury. He wasn't surprised. He was vindicated. "The curious girl," he said, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. "I told you not to make her mistake." He stepped into the passage, blocking the only exit. The space was so narrow I could smell the expensive wool of his suit, the faint scent of his cologne. There was nowhere to run. "Give it to me," he commanded, holding out a hand. "The phone." My mind raced, a frantic scramble for a solution. There was none. I was going to die here, in this damp, forgotten hole in the wall, and my body would never be found. But then a different kind of calm settled over me. The calm of a cornered animal with nothing left to lose. I wasn't weak. I wasn't Liana. I straightened up, my back against the stone wall. I looked him dead in the eye. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. His eyes narrowed. "Elara, don't be a fool." "I'm not being a fool," I said, my mind working, grasping for a weapon. "I'm being a wife, a partner. You said you wanted loyalty, discretion. I have something for you, something that shows my devotion." He was intrigued, despite himself. I could see it in the slight tilt of his head. What could you possibly have that I would want? "Liana's USB drive," I lied, my heart pounding. "I didn't give it to the police. I kept it. For leverage. For us. I know what's on it, Kaelen. I know about the ledgers, the trafficking. I know everything. I held up my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. And I know how to use it. I have copies, encrypted, set to be sent to every major news outlet and Interpol in 24 hours if I don't enter a password. If anything happens to me, your world burns. It was a desperate, colossal bluff. I had one picture. One, but it was all I had. He stared at me, his expression unreadable. He was weighing the odds. He was a man who controlled every variable, and I had just introduced a chaotic, unpredictable one. Me. You're lying, he said, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Am I? I challenged. Look at me. Look at what you've turned me into. The girl you married is gone. You killed her the day you killed my sister. In her place is the woman who will destroy you. Test me. I dare you. The silence stretched, thick with tension. He was a predator, but he was also a calculator. He wasn't a man who took risks he couldn't control. Fine, he said finally, his voice clipped. You want to be a partner? Let's be partners. Give me the phone. We'll go back to the study. We'll look at your insurance together. He thought he could talk his way out of it, reason with me, intimidate me. He took a step closer, his hand outstretched. That was the opening I needed. I didn't hand him the phone. I threw it at his face with all my strength. He flinched, ducking instinctively. In that split second of surprise, I lunged. I shoved him hard, using the wall as leverage. He stumbled back, off balance. I scrambled past him out of the passage, my bare feet slapping against the polished floor of the study. I didn't look back. I ran for the main door, wrenched it open, and sprinted into the dark, empty corridor. Guards! Seize her! Kaelen's roar echoed behind me. I ran blindly, my only thought to escape. I heard the heavy pounding of boots behind me. I reached the grand staircase and took the steps, 2 at a time, my gown tangling around my legs. I burst into the great hall just as 2 guards appeared from a side corridor. I didn't stop. I ran for the massive front doors of the castle, my lungs burning. I threw my weight against the iron-reinforced wood. It didn't budge. It was locked from the outside. I was trapped. The guards were closing in, their faces grim. Kaelen appeared at the top of the stairs, his face contorted with rage. He had been outplayed, and he knew it. He couldn't let me live, but he couldn't afford a messy public death in his own castle. Stop, he commanded the guards. They froze, their weapons raised. He walked down the stairs slowly, deliberately. He was going to do it himself. But I had one last move. I turned to face the guards, not Kaelen. The prince is a murderer! I screamed, my voice raw with terror and adrenaline. He killed my sister. He's going to kill me. His name is Sterling. Mr. Sterling! The guards exchanged confused, uncertain glances. They were loyal to the crown, but the crown was screaming accusations at them from the mouth of a princess. In that moment of hesitation, I saw it. A small, unassuming door under the grand staircase, used by the staff. I bolted for it, wrenched it open, and plunged into the darkness of the servants' quarters. Behind me, I heard Kaelen's furious bellow and the sound of pursuit. But I was in my element now. The labyrinth of the castle's underbelly was my only hope. The servants' corridors were a frantic, disorienting maze of low ceilings and narrow passageways. I could hear Kaelen shouting orders behind me, the heavy tread of boots echoing off the stone walls. I didn't have a plan. I just ran. I burst through a door and found myself in a vast, damp kitchen. Pots and pans hung from the rafters, and the air smelled of yeast and bleach. A startled cook stared at me, her mouth agape. I didn't stop. I saw a heavy wooden door at the far end of the kitchen, propped open with a doorstop to let in the cool night air. An exit. I sprinted for it, shoving a large rack of baking trays in my path. It crashed to the floor with a deafening clang, slowing my pursuers for a precious second. I dove through the door, tumbling out into a cobblestone alleyway. I was outside. I was out of the castle. I didn't hesitate. I ran into the dense forest that bordered the castle walls, the sharp branches tearing at my gown and skin. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, collapsing at the base of a giant pine tree. I was free, but I wasn't safe. I walked through the woods for what felt like hours, until I found a narrow, deserted road. As dawn broke, a logging truck rumbled toward me. I stumbled into the middle of the road, waving my arms. The driver, a grizzled man with a kind face, stopped. "Sweetheart, you're a long way from anywhere," he said, his voice rough with concern. I spun a lie, a torrent of words about an abusive boyfriend, a getaway gone wrong. He bought it. He let me huddle under a blanket in the passenger seat as he drove me to the next town, a small, sleepy cluster of houses and shops. I used the last of the cash from a hidden pocket in my gown to pay for an hour at a dingy internet cafe. My hands shook as I logged on to a public computer. I pulled up the picture of the ledger page. I opened a dozen email clients for major news organizations. In the body of each message, I typed the same thing. My name is Elara Vance. My sister Liana was murdered by Julian Sterling, who is now known as Prince Kaelen of Valtoria. This is his personal ledger. He is a trafficker and a killer. He tried to kill me too. Send help. I attached the photo and hit send on all of them. Then I deleted the browser history, stood up and walked out. A week later, I was in a bus station in a city I didn't know, dressed in cheap jeans and a hoodie. I watched the news on a flickering TV mounted in the corner. Kalen's face was everywhere. The anchor was using his real name, Julian Sterling. The words international scandal, human trafficking, and arrest warrant filled the air. They mentioned the brave, anonymous source who had brought down a monster. They mentioned the missing Princess Elara, now presumed to be his final victim. I watched as they showed a picture of my sister, smiling and bright. A single tear traced a path down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of release. I pulled the hood of my sweatshirt low over my face, bought a ticket for a bus going nowhere in particular, and disappeared into the crowd. I was no one. I was nowhere. And for the first time since Liana died, I was finally free.